The warm golden light of the setting sun washed over Jack's face, casting a soft glow across Carter's sleek office. It turned the sprawling Manhattan skyline outside the windows into an amber masterpiece. A long shadow stretched across the room, and his figure was reflected in the tall glass. As he adjusted his tie, the movement felt almost mechanical. On his polished mahogany desk lay the divorce papers, their mere presence weighing on him like a secret he had been hiding for the last year and a half. He couldn't look away from them, his chest tightened as the realization hit him. In just a few short hours, his 10-year marriage to Melissa Robinson, filled with dreams, laughter, and challenges, would officially end. He had convinced himself it was the right decision, even if it was what she deserved, but the heaviness in his chest said otherwise. A gentle knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. When he looked up, there she was, Melissa. She stood in the doorway, dressed simply but elegantly in a blue dress. Her face appeared calm, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions that had been building inside her. Even as everything between them crumbled, Jack couldn't help but feel her effortless allure. "You're early," Jack said, his voice softer than he meant. "You're late," Melissa replied, stepping into the room with the same quiet confidence that had first drawn him to her all those years ago. "But then again, you've always been late when it matters." Jack glanced at his watch, 7:22 p.m. She was right. Before he could make any excuses, Melissa walked across the room. The soft click of her heels echoed on the hardwood floor. Her fingers brushed the edge of the divorce papers, but she didn't look at them. Instead, she met his gaze. Her voice was steady, though there was a slight vulnerability in it. "Before we sign anything," she said, "I have one final request. I want us to spend one last night together." Jack stared at her, confusion and doubt clouding his thoughts. "One last night?" he repeated, his voice trembling with uncertainty. Melissa nodded slowly, taking a step closer. Her eyes were firm but soft. "Yes. No lawyers. No papers. No anger. Just you and me, remembering what we once had. And maybe, finally, facing the truth." Her words hit Jack like a wave crashing against him. For a moment, it felt like the ground beneath him had shifted. "And if I say no?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. "Then tomorrow," Melissa said, her tone soft but resolute, "it'll just be two strangers signing divorce papers." "But we deserve more than that, Jack. Don't you remember how we were a team?" Her words squeezed at his heart, threatening to bring him to his knees. He took a deep breath and steadied himself. "Fine. But if we do this, you have to agree to one thing: honesty. No secrets. No hiding. You need to know everything." Melissa blinked, surprised by his sudden consent. Then a slow, bittersweet smile spread across her face. It was the kind of smile that carried years of unspoken emotions. "Everything," she repeated, extending her hand toward him. Jack took her hand, feeling the warmth of her palm, a sensation he thought he had lost forever. "All right," he said, his voice stronger now. "So, where do we begin?" Melissa's grip tightened slightly, her eyes shining with something that felt like hope, mixed with nostalgia. "First, we leave this office," she said, glancing at the divorce papers on his desk. "Then we remember how it used to be, us again, even if it's just for one night." Jack followed her out of the office, leaving the unsigned papers behind. He knew that tonight would change everything. The small restaurant where Melissa and Jack had spent some of their earliest dates felt achingly familiar. The flickering candlelight on the table evoked memories of laughter and intimate conversations. But tonight, the air between them was thick with unspoken tension. Melissa smiled faintly as the server set their favorite dessert in front of her: rich chocolate cake, the one she'd always loved. "Do you remember this place?" she asked, her voice soft, tinged with emotion. "Of course I do," Jack replied, trying to keep his tone steady, though inside he felt as if the weight of the confession he was about to make would crush him. Melissa set her fork down carefully, her hands trembling as she locked eyes with him. There was a quiet resolve in her gaze, as though she was stripping away his carefully built defenses. "Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "what's going on? Why did you push me away?" Melissa's words cut through Jack like a knife. His breath hitched as he leaned back in his chair, taking a shaky breath. "You want the truth?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," Melissa said firmly, her eyes fixed on his. Jack lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. "I was diagnosed with cancer, Melissa," he confessed. The words poured out, as if the dam had broken. Everything around them seemed to fall away. "Cancer," she echoed, her voice faltering in disbelief. It was above a whisper, and the diagnosis was clear: stage 3 brain cancer. "I never wanted you to go through the agony of losing someone else, especially after everything you've already endured with your family. I just couldn't bear the thought of putting you through that kind of pain again." Melissa froze for a moment, taking in my words, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed, harsher, more biting. "You thought you were protecting me by keeping this from me?" she asked, the anger in her words sharp, laced with a kind of betrayal. "You thought I'd leave when you needed me the most?" "I didn't want to burden you," I muttered, the weight of it all settling heavily in my chest. "I figured if you hated me, it'd be easier for you to move on." Tears ran down Melissa's cheeks, but there was a fire in her eyes, a raw blend of anger and hurt. "You didn't even give me a choice, Jack," she said, her voice trembling, but firm. "Love isn't about shielding each other from pain. It's about facing it together even when it feels like it'll break you." She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping softly against the floor as she pushed it back. "I need some air," she said, walking away, leaving me behind, feeling like my heart was shattering into pieces. I found Melissa later, standing in a small park near the restaurant, a place that held memories of the early days of our relationship. She was standing by the stone railing, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights, casting her silhouette against the dark. I hesitated for a moment before walking toward her, my coat draped over my arm. "You'll catch a cold," I said quietly, draping it over her shoulders. Melissa didn't turn at first, but her voice came out steady, though bitter. "It's ironic, isn't it? You're worried about me catching a cold, but you've been carrying around an illness that could have taken you from me forever." I swallowed, the knot in my throat making it hard to breathe. "I know," I said, my voice low. "I was wrong, Melissa. But I didn't know what else to do. I just couldn't let you see me go through this. I couldn't let you hurt more." Melissa turned to face me, her eyes glistening with tears, her voice now fierce. "Do you think I'm so fragile I couldn't handle this?" she asked, stepping closer. "You don't get it, Jack. I've already lost my parents, my brother. But the thing I can't stand is you making all the decisions without even asking me what I think." "I was scared," I said, my voice breaking. "I wasn't afraid of dying, but of making you watch it happen. I couldn't stand the thought of hurting you." Melissa looked deep into my eyes, a mix of sorrow and resolve. "Love isn't about protecting each other by hiding the truth," she said softly. "It's about standing together in the storm and refusing to let go. If you thought I wasn't strong enough, Jack, then you were wrong." In that moment, it felt like the walls I'd built around myself started to crumble. I took a deep breath, a wave of gratitude washing over me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me," I whispered. "I don't need to forgive you," Melissa replied, her voice steady. "I need us to fight this together. No more secrets, Jack. You don't have to do this alone." 3 days later, Melissa and I walked into my doctor's office at the medical center. Melissa sat beside me, a notebook in hand filled with questions she'd researched about my condition. As I glanced at her, a quiet sense of gratitude filled my chest. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her eyes soft yet watchful. I nodded, though my palms were sweaty. "I'm better with you here," I admitted, for the first time truly feeling like I wasn't facing this fight alone. Dr. Chin entered the room, holding a folder and smiling warmly. "Jack, Melissa, it's great to see you both today," she said, as we sat down. "Let's go over your progress." While the doctor explained the results, Melissa quickly scribbled notes, asking questions I hadn't even thought of. I sat quietly, in awe of her strength and determination. "Doctor," Melissa interjected, her tone confident. "Beyond the treatments, are there ways to improve his quality of life during this phase?" The doctor smiled, clearly impressed with her questions. In the weeks before, I'd felt lost, unsure of what to do. But now, for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. When we left the office, hand in hand, I turned to Melissa and said, "I never thought I deserved you." She looked at me, her smile gentle. "You don't have to deserve me, Jack. We just have to try for each other." In the days that followed, Melissa was by my side, every step of the way. She wasn't just my wife, she was my closest ally, my caregiver, and an unwavering pillar of support. Every morning, she woke up early to prepare a light, nourishing breakfast, carefully crafted to support my treatment. Whenever the nausea and exhaustion from chemotherapy overwhelmed me, she was there, holding my hand, speaking softly, her words the only thing that could calm my restless mind. "You don't have to pretend you're okay with me," Melissa would say gently whenever I tried to force a smile. "Lean on me, Jack. If you're weak, I'll carry the strength for both of us." As time passed, my strength waned. The fatigue that once felt manageable now left me exhausted, confined to the couch for hours. His breath became shallow, his hands trembled, but in the silence of the moments when Melissa's steady care surrounded him, his mind wandered back to the days when life had felt lighter. He thought of their laughter by the lake, the way her hand fit perfectly in his. One evening, as Melissa gently draped a blanket across his lap, he reached out, his voice barely a whisper but full of determination. "Melissa," he said, meeting her eyes. "There's one place I want to go, one last time." Evenings were often spent on the couch, the soft light from the lamp casting a warm, comforting glow around them. Melissa would read aloud to him, sometimes novels, sometimes articles about mental resilience during cancer treatment. One night, Jack looked at her and said, his voice quiet but full of emotion, "I never thought I'd find peace in days like these, but with you, I believe we're still living, not just getting by." Melissa smiled and gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "That's because we still have hope," she replied, her voice filled with quiet strength. "Even the smallest spark of hope can light up the darkest of days." Despite the long road ahead, Melissa never allowed Jack to feel like he was facing this alone. She took care of everything, the appointments, treatments, daily routines, while making sure he always felt her love and belief in him. Her care reminded him every day that they were in this together, and no matter what happened next, she would never let go. 3 months later, Jack and Melissa stood on the rooftop of their apartment. The city lights twinkled below them in the winter night, and the cold didn't seem to touch them as Jack held a small velvet box, anticipation clear in his eyes. "I think it's time we start over," he said, his voice warm, though a little shaky. Melissa's eyes widened in surprise before a soft smile spread across her face. "Start over?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Jack opened the box to reveal 2 simple platinum wedding bands, freshly cleaned and resized. "I thought it was time to put these back on," he said, "but not as a continuation of what we had. As a symbol of the new marriage we're building." Melissa stared at the rings, tears glistening in her eyes. "Are you sure?" "We're still figuring things out," she said, her voice a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I'm more than sure," Jack replied. 3 months ago, you asked for one last night, but you gave me so much more. You gave me a reason to fight, a future to look forward to. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of that." Melissa held out her left hand, a smile lighting up her face. "I agree, Jack," she said. "Today, tomorrow, and always." As Jack slipped the ring onto her finger, they both felt like they were starting a new chapter, one that was filled with love, hope, and resilience. But time wasn't on their side. Jack's strength continued to fade. Each step became more of a struggle, every breath harder to take. Still, he held on to one last wish in his heart, to spend a day at the lake, the place that had held so many beautiful memories for them. One crisp autumn morning, Jack watched Melissa make tea in the kitchen. His voice was soft, but firm. "Can you take me to the lake, just one more time?" Melissa looked up, concern flashing in her eyes, but she understood his wish. "Of course, Jack," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her heart. They arrived at the lake late in the afternoon, the water shimmering under the golden sunlight, and the red and orange leaves floating gently on the surface. It was a peaceful sight, yet there was an undeniable sense of finality in the air. Jack sat on an old wooden bench, his hands trembling as he tried to steady his breath. Melissa sat beside him, gripping his hand tightly, unwilling to let go. "Melissa," Jack began, his voice fragile but full of gratitude. "Thank you for never giving up on me. Even when I pushed you away, you stayed. You gave me more than I ever deserved." Melissa smiled through the tears that quietly fell down her cheeks. "I promise you, Jack. Love isn't just about being together on the good days. It's about standing by each other through the hardest moments." The lake stretched out in front of them, its calm surface reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. Jack's breath slowed, his shoulders sagging as he leaned back against the bench. Melissa watched him silently, her heart aching as she noticed the tremor in his hand, the way his once strong posture had faded into frailty. "Jack," she whispered, her voice steady, even as tears threatened to spill. "I'm here. You don't have to say anything more."